the darkness pressing in around them. Rosie fumbled with the keys, casting one last weary look over her shoulder before they stepped inside and locked the door. The night's chill seeped into her bones, mingling with the tension of their close call. Keanu did a thorough check of the perimeter, ensuring they hadn't been followed. Finally, in the safety of their home, Rosie couldn't hold back any longer. "You owe me an explanation," she said, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and frustration. "Why would you agree to this? What are you planning, Keanu?" Only when he was certain of their safety did he finally break his silence. "I know you're worried," he began, his voice soft but firm. "But I need you to trust me." Accepting that challenge was a tactical move to prevent immediate danger. Rosie's eyes widened in surprise. "What do you mean? How does agreeing to meet those thugs again, with our dogs no less, prevent danger?" Keanu moved to the window, peering out into the darkening street before drawing the curtains closed. "If I had refused, they might have followed us home tonight. This way we bought ourselves some time." Despite his explanation, concern was still etched deeply on Rosie's face. "But surely you're not actually planning to go through with it? To risk our dogs in some twisted fight?" Keanu shook his head, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "Of course not. I have no intention of engaging in any fighting, dog or otherwise. I have a better plan." Rosie's posture relaxed slightly, though worry still clouded her eyes. "What kind of plan?" "I'm going to settle this tonight," Keanu said, his tone resolute. "Just trust me. I'll deal with this situation before it escalates further." Rosie's eyes widened in alarm. "Tonight, Keanu? That's too dangerous. We should call the police, let them handle it." Keanu shook his head. "The police can't do much without concrete evidence, and if we involve them now, it might just anger these guys more." Despite her obvious concern, Rosie nodded slowly. "I do trust you," she said softly. "Just be careful, okay?" With a reassuring smile, Keanu kissed Rosie gently before heading toward the door. "I will. Just for safety measures, lock up behind me and don't open the door for anyone." As Keanu stepped out into the cool evening air, he could hear the faint sounds of Dolly and Peggy playing inside. The normalcy of the sound contrasted sharply with the tension of the situation, strengthening his resolve to put an end to this threat quickly and quietly. His first stop was back at the gas station. The same cashier from earlier was still on duty, looking surprised to see Keanu return so soon. "Everything okay, Mr. Reeves?" the cashier asked, concern evident in his voice. Keanu nodded, keeping his tone casual. "Yeah, just forgot something earlier. Say, those bikers who were causing trouble, do you know anything about them? Where they might hang out?" The cashier's expression darkened. "Oh, them? Yeah, they're bad news. Their clubhouse is actually not far from here. Moved into the neighborhood recently. Been causing nothing but trouble since." Keanu's interest was piqued. "Their clubhouse? You wouldn't happen to know where exactly, would you?" The cashier hesitated for a moment before seemingly making up his mind. "It's just a few streets over," he said, lowering his voice. "Big place with a gate. Can't miss it. Got some kind of wolf logo on it." Thanking the cashier, Keanu headed out, following the directions he'd been given. It didn't take long to spot the clubhouse, its gate prominently displaying the Iron Wolves insignia. As he approached, Keanu felt a mix of determination and caution. He knew he was taking a calculated risk by coming here directly, but he was confident in his ability to handle whatever situation might arise. Standing before the gate, Keanu took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. Then with a steady hand he reached out and pressed the buzzer, ready to face whatever, or whoever, awaited him on the other side. The sound of the buzzer echoed in the night air, seeming unnaturally loud in the quiet street. For a moment there was no response, and Keanu found himself wondering if perhaps the clubhouse was empty. Then abruptly a voice crackled through the intercom. "Who's there?" The voice was gruff, suspicious. Keanu leaned closer to the speaker. "It's Keanu Reeves. I'm here to speak with your leader about the incident at the gas station earlier today." There was a pause. Then the voice returned, this time with a note of surprise. "And was that excitement? Keanu Reeves? The actor? Hold on a sec. I'll buzz you in." The gate began to slide open with a mechanical whir. As Keanu stepped onto the property, he could see activity through the windows of the large house that served as the clubhouse. Figures moved back and forth, and he could hear muffled voices growing louder as he approached the front door. The door swung open, revealing a man in his late 30s, his muscular frame covered in tattoos. Despite his intimidating appearance, his face bore an expression of warmth and recognition. "Mr. Reeves," he exclaimed, extending a hand. "I'm Nero. Welcome to our humble abode. We weren't expecting such a distinguished guest." Keanu shook the offered hand, maintaining a neutral expression. "Thank you for seeing me on such short notice, Nero. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." Nero waved off the concern. "Not at all, not at all. Please come in. The boys will be thrilled to meet you." As Keanu stepped inside, he found himself in a large open space that seemed to serve as both a living room and a bar. Leather couches were scattered around, and a massive screen TV dominated one wall. The room was filled with leather-clad men, all of whom had fallen silent at Keanu's entrance, their expressions a mix of surprise and awe. Nero raised his voice, addressing the room at large. "Hey everyone! Look who's come to pay us a visit. It's Keanu Reeves himself." A murmur of excitement rippled through the crowd. Keanu could hear whispered comments about his movies, his stunts, his fighting skills. It was clear that, despite the earlier confrontation with Tucker and Vince, many of these men were fans. Nero began to lead Keanu through the room, calling out as they walked. "Where's Pri? Someone go get Pri." As they made their way through the clubhouse, Keanu took careful note of his surroundings, counting exits and gauging the demeanor of the men around him. Most seemed genuinely excited by his presence, but he remained alert for any signs of hostility. They had just reached the far end of the room when an imposing figure entered. The man was tall and broad-shouldered, his presence commanding immediate respect from those around him. He wore a leather jacket adorned with spikes, setting him apart from the others. "I'm Pri," the man said, his deep voice carrying easily across the now quiet room. "To what do we owe the honor of your visit, Mr. Reeves?" Before Keanu could respond, the relative calm of the room was shattered by the arrival of two familiar faces. Tucker and Vince burst into the room, their faces contorted with anger. "What the hell is he doing here?" Tucker shouted, pointing an accusing finger at Keanu. "I thought we had an agreement." Vince chimed in, his voice dripping with venom. "Yeah. He's supposed to meet us tomorrow morning, not come sneaking around our clubhouse." The tension in the room was palpable. Nero quickly stepped between the two men and Keanu, raising his hands in a calming gesture. "Hold on, guys. Let's hear what he has to say first." Keanu took a deep breath, addressing the room. "I came here to resolve this situation peacefully. I have no intention of fighting, and I believe we can find a solution that doesn't involve violence." Pri's eyes narrowed as he studied Keanu. "And what solution might that be?" The room fell silent once more as Pri considered Keanu's proposal. Finally he nodded. "All right. We'll hear you out. But know this, Mr. Reeves. If we feel like you're not taking us seriously, things could get ugly." Keanu acknowledged Pri's words with a nod. "Understood. Let's start by discussing the root of your grievances." Nero led Keanu to a large table in the center of the room, and the other members of the gang gathered around, creating an intense and almost theatrical atmosphere. Keanu could feel their eyes on him, a mix of skepticism and curiosity. Pri began, his voice steady. "We've been pushed to the margins for too long. The community doesn't want us here. They see us as troublemakers, as outcasts. But we're just trying to survive, to find our place." Keanu listened intently, understanding the deep-seated frustrations behind Pri's words. "I see. The community's resistance has made you feel unwelcome and persecuted. But resorting to violence only reinforces their negative perceptions of you." Tucker interjected, his voice filled with bitterness. "Easy for you to say. You've got money, fame, a good life. What do you know about struggling to fit in?" Keanu met Tucker's gaze calmly. "You're right. I haven't walked in your shoes. But I know what it's like to feel out of place, to be misunderstood. I'm here because I believe there's a way to bridge the gap between your group and the community." Pri leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing. So, what's your solution, Mr. Reeves? Keanu took a deep breath before speaking. First, let's work on improving communication. I can help set up a meeting with community leaders where you can voice your concerns and negotiate for better understanding and cooperation. A murmur spread through the room as the gang members exchanged uncertain glances. Vince was the first to speak up, skepticism etched on his face. You really think they'll listen to us? Keanu nodded. If we present our case respectfully and reasonably, they'll have to listen. And I'm willing to use my platform to amplify your voices. Pre considered this for a moment before nodding slowly. Alright, we'll give it a shot. But what about the immediate situation? What about the challenge? Keanu smiled, his relief evident. We call it off. I'll speak to the community and let them know that you were willing to resolve this peacefully. It'll show good faith on both sides. As the tension in the room began to dissipate, Keanu could see a glimmer of hope in the gang members' eyes. Nero clapped a hand on Keanu's shoulder. You're one of a kind, Mr. Reeves. Let's make this work. Leaving the clubhouse later that night, Keanu felt a mix of exhaustion and cautious optimism. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but the first steps had been taken. Back at home, Rosie was waiting anxiously. As soon as Keanu walked through the door, she rushed to him, her eyes searching his face for answers. What happened? Are you okay? Keanu wrapped his arms around Rosie, pulling her close. I'm fine. We had a productive conversation. They're willing to negotiate. Relief washed over Rosie's face, though concern still lingered in her eyes. I'm glad, but please be careful. This could still be dangerous. Keanu nodded, understanding her worry. I will. We'll take it one step at a time. But I believe we can find a peaceful resolution. Over the next few days, Keanu worked tirelessly to arrange a meeting between the gang and community leaders. He used his connections and influence to ensure that the meeting would be taken seriously, emphasizing the importance of understanding and cooperation. When the day of the meeting arrived, the atmosphere was tense but hopeful. Community leaders, gang members, and concerned residents gathered in a neutral location, all eyes on Keanu as he began to speak. Thank you all for coming. We're here today to address the concerns and frustrations that have been building for far too long. It's time to find common ground and work together for the betterment of our community. Pre stepped forward, his demeanor calm but determined. We just want to be heard, to be treated with respect. We're not asking for special treatment, just understanding and a chance to prove ourselves. The discussions that followed were challenging but necessary. Both sides aired their grievances and fears, and slowly, a sense of mutual respect began to develop. Keanu's presence and mediation played a crucial role in keeping the conversation productive and focused. By the end of the meeting, an agreement was reached to establish a community outreach program, where gang members could contribute positively through various initiatives, and in return, they would receive support and resources to integrate better into the community. As the meeting concluded, Keanu felt a sense of accomplishment and relief. He knew there was still much work to be done, but the first major hurdle had been overcome. Back at home, Rosie greeted him with a warm smile. You did it, Keanu. You really did it. Keanu hugged her tightly, feeling the weight of the past few days lift off his shoulders. We did it, Rosie. This is just the beginning, but it's a good start. As they stood together, embracing the promise of a better future, Keanu couldn't help but reflect on the power of communication, understanding, and the willingness to seek peaceful solutions. It was a lesson he hoped would resonate not just within their community but far beyond. Keanu stood tall, his gaze steady and unwavering despite the growing tension in the room. I came here because I want to put an end to this nonsense, he said, his voice calm but filled with resolve. I don't want to fight, and I don't want anyone getting hurt, especially not the dogs. We're all adults here. Let's find a way to resolve this without turning it into a bigger mess. There was a brief silence as Pre studied Keanu, his expression unreadable. Around them, the other men exchanged glances, the excitement from earlier replaced by a sense of uncertainty. Tucker and Vince, however, were less than convinced. You think you can just walk in here and talk your way out of this? Tucker sneered, taking a step forward. You've got a lot of nerve, Reeves. Keanu didn't flinch, his eyes locking with Tucker's. "It's not about nerve," he replied. "It's about being smart. You want to get what you're owed without causing any more problems, right?" Pri raised a hand, silencing Tucker before he could respond. "Let him finish," he said, his voice carrying the weight of authority. Keanu nodded, then addressed the group. "Here's the thing. I understand you've got a code, a way of doing business. But this isn't about that. It's about control of the situation and of the outcome. I'm offering you a way out that keeps your pride intact and resolves things cleanly. No bloodshed, no mess." "Yeah, and what's your end game?" Vince sneered from the back. "What's in it for you?" Keanu's expression remained calm, almost too calm. "What's in it for me is simple," he said, his voice taking on a steely edge. "I'm protecting the people I care about. I'm protecting my dogs. You can keep your reputation and I get to go home without worrying about a bunch of bikers making things personal." The room was quiet for a moment, the men processing his words. Keanu could see the wheels turning in Pri's mind, and he could almost sense the leader weighing his options. Finally, Pri spoke. "You know, I like your style, Reeves. You're not like the others who come in here all hot-headed and ready to fight. You've got a way of talking that doesn't make enemies. I respect that." Keanu gave a small nod. "I'm not here to make enemies. I just want this to be over." Pri looked around at the group, his gaze lingering on Tucker and Vince, who both seemed less than pleased with the turn of events. He could feel the tension mounting, the decision hanging in the air. Finally, he made up his mind. "All right, here's what we'll do," Pri said, his voice firm. "You'll pay your dues just like we agreed. But I'm giving you one chance to walk away from this clean. If you're serious about not wanting trouble, you'll keep your word and keep your distance from us. No more sneaky visits, no more running interference." Keanu held his ground. "Agreed. No more sneaky visits. But I also expect you to keep your word. No threats. No involving my dogs. And no more intimidation." Pri smiled, a grim but genuine expression. "You've got yourself a deal, Reeves. Just remember, this doesn't mean we're friends. It means we've got an understanding. And as long as you stick to your word, we won't have a problem." Keanu gave a small, respectful nod. "You won't regret it." With the agreement reached, the tension in the room began to dissipate. The iron wolves, for the moment, had been appeased. Keanu felt a sense of cautious relief wash over him, but he knew this wasn't over. Not entirely. "Good. Now if you'll excuse me, I've got some people waiting for me," Keanu said, turning toward the door. "One last thing," Pri called out, his voice soft but commanding. Keanu paused and turned back. "If you ever find yourself in trouble again, don't hesitate to come talk to me first," Pri said, his tone surprisingly sincere. "We may not be friends, but I respect you. And in this world, that counts for something." Keanu nodded once, then exited the clubhouse, the door swinging shut behind him. As he stepped out into the cool night air, he felt a slight weight lift from his chest, though he knew the danger wasn't entirely gone. But for tonight at least he had won a small victory. As he walked back to his car, Keanu's thoughts turned to Rosie. He knew she'd be worried, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something bigger. He wasn't sure what it was, but he had a feeling the Iron Wolves would be the least of his concerns going forward. Back at the house, Rosie was waiting for him by the window, her eyes scanning the street as she tried to gauge his return. When Keanu finally appeared, her face softened in relief. "Keanu," she whispered, opening the door before he could even knock. "You're back. Thank God." Keanu smiled and stepped inside. "Everything's fine," he said. "It's over. No one's getting hurt." Rosie looked at him, still not entirely convinced. "But are you sure? You didn't?" He shook his head, placing a finger gently to her lips. "I told you. I'm smarter than that. I promised you it would be okay. And it will be." For the first time in what felt like forever, Rosie smiled, her fear melting away as she wrapped her arms around him. Keanu held her close, knowing that for now they were safe. But as the night wore on, Keanu couldn't help but wonder what other dangers awaited them. The Iron Wolves might be content for now, but in his gut, Keanu knew this was just a taste of something much more dangerous lurking on the horizon. And he would be ready.